What is going on, football fans? I am super excited to be back at it with my latest video. And in today's video, we're going to jump a year ahead into the future because I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the New York Giants' projected salary cap space for the 2020 season and some things they may be able to do to alter it and some of the players they could potentially bring in to help this team contend and maybe even win a Super Bowl in the 2020 year. You always got to think positive, right? And the New York Giants, we all heard after some of the trades they made, obviously trading away Odell Beckham, Snacks Harrison, their high-profile players, the Olivier Vernons, it freed up some cap space, which made us excited for the 2020 year. Of course, this offseason, we did not have a lot of money to spend, which is why we were bargain shoppers. We went out, we got DeMarcus Golden on the $3.7 million deal. We got the Antoine Bethea on the 2-year deal worth about $4.5 per year. We had to be selective in the way we spent our money. But we all heard that the Giants were going to have approximately $100 million to spend the following offseason with some alterations they could potentially make. That was, of course, before they went out and they signed Golden Tate to his deal and extended Sterling Shepard to his. Both those players cost approximately $20 million. And when you look at the salary cap right now for the New York Giants for the 2020 season, as of today, that is without making any trades, without making any cuts. But it is including Eli Manning being off the roster, which I think all New York Giants fans probably do project, especially after we drafted Daniel Jones 6th overall and have him on that rookie contract. But the salary cap as of today stands at just under $52 million heading into next season. And that's a lot of money, but it's far from that $100 million. But I wanted to take a quick look into the salary cap and see some things the Giants could potentially do to try to free up some money for the Giants in next year's offseason. Obviously, a salary cap usually consists, it's very top-heavy, the way that it is broken down, right? The bottom half of your roster usually makes about $10 or $15 million, and your top 8 players make up the bulk of the cap. And it's the same way here with the New York Giants. When you look at next year's cap right now, you have Nate Solder, who, of course, the Giants signed to that mega deal last season to play left tackle for the Giants, making $17 million a year. He, as of now, will be the highest paid player on the Giants next year, and they certainly will not be able to cut him. He carries a dead cap hit of $8 million, and quite frankly, he's very important to this Giants offensive line. The second player on the list makes just under $15 million, and that is Janoris Jenkins. So that is a player I think we all project that the New York Giants can and probably will either trade this season or cut him going into next offseason. I think if Jenkins is playing well, I expect him, unless the Giants are in the playoffs or well within playoff contention, I expect Jenkins to be traded off this roster, especially with all the young talent we brought in at the cornerback position over the last 2 drafts in a Sam Beal, in a DeAndre Baker or Julian Love, and those guys alike. So if you were able to trade Jenkins this year, that would free up almost $15 million off your cap. So that would bring the $52 million all the way up to almost $67 million. So that would be a huge savings and money that the Giants would be able to put into very important areas. I think with all the youth at the cornerback position, and this is not a knock on Janoris Jenkins, I think the money could be better allocated somewhere else. So I expect Janoris Jenkins to certainly be hopefully traded. I'd rather trade him than cut him and take that $3.5 million dead cap hit, along with not getting anything for him. You would like to get at least a draft pick, even if it was like a 5th rounder that we acquired for a Damon Snacks Harrison. The next guy up on the list is Kevin Zeitler. Zeitler will be here. He costs $12.5 million with a $5.5 million dead cap hit. He will be a New York Giant. He is way too vital to that offensive line. He's our best offensive lineman as it stands today. Alec Ogletree, who makes $11.75 next season, which is a ton of money for a middle linebacker, and he's getting a little bit up there in age, would be a $3.5 million dead cap hit. Now, I don't think the Giants will trade him this year. I'd be surprised. Maybe they trade him in the offseason, but we all remember the Giants traded to acquire him, and they didn't get much. I think they, obviously the Rams didn't get much. I think they got a 5th-round pick for him. And I don't think the Giants would get much for him either. They may have to cut Ogletree, but with the savings you would get, I personally think it would probably be worth it. And that would be another $8.25 million in savings. We'd round down to 8, and that would bump us up to $75 million. So we're already at $75 million to spend just by trading away Jenkins and cutting Ogletree going into next season. Golden Tate will absolutely be here. He stands to make $10.5. He carries over a $15 million dead cap hit. The same could be said for Saquon Barkley. And why the hell would we ever think about cutting Barkley to begin with? Sterling Shepard, same thing, just signed that extension. And then you go down the list. Rhett Ellison is another guy that I do think the Giants will cut, because when you look at his salary, he stands to make $6.25, and he would carry a $1.25 million dead cap hit. And quite frankly, as much as I like Rhett Ellison, he's expendable, and it's $5 million in savings, which is a ton of money, which would then bring us up to $80 million. And Scott Simonson, I think, is more than capable of filling in for his role on next year's roster. I think Ellison will be on the team this year. You then go and you look at a Kareem Martin, another guy that is certainly expendable. He's due to make just under $6 million, and he carries just over a $1 million dead cap hit. So that would approximately be about $4.5 to $5 million in savings. Now we're up to like 85. So you have a lot of money saved just by getting rid of these players. Evan Ingram would absolutely be here. Bethea could be cut. That would be another 2.5 in savings if you went out and you drafted a young safety. So there are ways to get this cap. Pulley will definitely be cut, in my opinion. He carries no dead cap hit, and he's projected to make $2.675 million next year. So when you look at this cap, there is a lot of ways to save here. And I think they're going to have, based on my projections, I think they're going to have between 80 and $88 to $90 million to spend next offseason, and that is before factoring in the adjustment in the salary cap. Every year, the NFL salary cap goes up by approximately $10 million. If you go back and look at the course of history over the last 3 or 4 years, it's usually between $13 and $10 million, but we'll play it conservatively here and say they would, it'll go up by $10 million, which would give the Giants approximately, in my opinion, $95 to $100 million to spend. And that is when you have to look at the roster and see where the Giants should spend that money and what players they should spend it on. But before we get to the players, I wanted to go over the positions and where I think it would be best suited for the Giants to spend that 95 or 90, whatever it is, $million that they will have to spend next offseason. The quarterback position is, of course, sewed up with the rookie contract in Daniel Jones. Running back, Saquon Barkley, the least of your worries. Wide receiver, maybe they could go out and spend. Obviously, they're paying Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate about a combined $20 million, which is about what they were paying Beckham. So they basically took Beckham's money and used it for 2 wide receivers instead of 1. But they could certainly go out there and try to sign a big-time wide receiver. I don't know if I would personally go that route. You could cut Tate the following season, though. I think he only carries about a $5 million dead cap hit the following year if you saw fit to sign a wide receiver in the offseason. And we'll certainly go over some wide receivers after we go down the roster breakdown. But it's definitely not one of their biggest needs. Evan Ingram still very talented there. And obviously Barkley, a good wide receiver out of the backfield. Offensive line is certainly a place where the Giants could target. Right tackle and center would be the positions of emphasis if they were going to go after one in the free agency market. And if they were going to sign a player to their offense for a big price tag, a big ticket free agent next year, I think it would be on the offensive line. I don't think it would be anywhere else. I think the majority of their free agency money could and probably should be spent on the defense. And when you look at the defense, they're pretty strong up the middle, especially after drafting Dexter Lawrence, and they have affordable players there with a B.J. Hill and such. The exterior pass rush is absolutely the biggest concern for this team. Lorenzo Carter, as much as I like him, still unproven. I think he had 4 sacks last year, and I think he does have a high upside, and he should progress this year. We'll have to wait and see. Marcus Golden's on a 1-year deal, and if he performs well, maybe the Giants bring him back, but he will be off the team next year. They have other, Kareem Martin, I said I would probably cut him, and we'll see how the X-Man does. But the Giants definitely, I think, should target a big ticket free agent at the pass rusher position that fits the 3-4 defense. That's another thing you have to look at, because not every pass rusher fits the 3-4 defense, and we're going to look into that as well. And then in the secondary, the cornerback spot, like I said, pretty sewn up. A safety could certainly be a spot where I could see the Giants spending big money next year, because Antoine Bethea is not going to be here forever. They could draft one, but could certainly see them going out and spending some of that money on a safety position. Not really Gettleman's way. Gettleman, if you look over the course of his history, he does spend on the wide receiver position a bit with the Carolina Panthers, or at least puts emphasis on it. He spent a lot of first-round picks there, but he really does like to focus on the offensive and defensive lines. But they certainly could go after a safety. So if they were going to spend on a big-ticket guy, I could see a safety, I could see a pass rusher, I could see a right tackle or a center or a wide receiver. I think those would be the areas of concern for the New York Giants next year. And without further ado, let's get into some of the names that the New York Giants could potentially pursue. So if you look at the list of players in next year's free agency class at the positions of need for the New York Giants, and one position I should have also said is the middle linebacker position, especially if we were to cut or trade an Alec Ogletree. We, of course, would need to replace him at the middle linebacker spot. And there are certainly a few guys in next year's class that could fit the bill, and we're going to start right there. We're going to start at the middle linebacker spot, and two guys that caught my eye are Bobby Wagner and Danny Trevathan. They're both around the same age. Trevathan would probably come a little cheaper. Bobby Wagner is going to be 31 next offseason, so he's certainly up there in age, but he's still as good as it gets. Last year, per PFF, he was ranked the #1 middle linebacker in all of football. And the Giants are certainly going to have enough cap space to potentially bring him in to be a guy that could fill in for a few years at the middle linebacker spot. And the Giants, in pretty recent history, have had pretty good success doing that. You go back to Antonio Pierce, he was a free agent, and he's the best middle linebacker we've had in quite some time. And it could be a similar type of acquisition where we bring in Bobby Wagner, a guy with playoff experience, Super Bowl ring, that could bring that leadership to this New York Giants team. So that is certainly a guy that the Giants could look at. And Trevathan, a very talented middle linebacker in his own right from the Chicago Bears. I think he ranked 20th last year per PFF, but he's been one of the better middle linebackers in the NFL over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. So those are two guys I think the Giants could potentially look at the middle linebacker spot. We're going to shift our attention to the offensive line and the right tackle position. Jack Conklin is a guy that the Giants passed on, of course, in the NFL draft. No, didn't pass on, rather. They were jumped for, that a lot of Giants fans thought that they would take. Instead, we ended up with Eli Apple. Jack Conklin was not extended on his fifth-year option, so he is projected to hit the open market next year. And if he does and he proves he's healthy, he, of course, is coming off an injury. He was a Pro Bowler his rookie season, and he was one of the best tackles in football. If he could get back to that this season, he is a guy that the Giants, I think he's only 26 years old right now, could look to sign on a long-term deal to fill in at that right tackle spot, and they'll certainly have the money to do that as well. Darrell Williams is the other name. Darrell Williams, a lot of Giants fans thought we were going to sign him this offseason. He, of course, was coming off an injury, but he was a former Gettleman guy. Gettleman had selected him in the 5th round, and he had a lot of success in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers before the injury, and he signed at a discounted rate with Carolina this year, probably because of the injury, was not getting long-term offers. But if Darrell Williams could prove he's healthy and hits the open market, I could certainly see the Giants pursuing him to fill that right tackle void. So there's two names there at the right tackle position. As far as the wide receiver goes, there's a lot of veterans, guys that I would not spend my money on at the top. A.J. Green, who's 32, and Emmanuel Sanders. There was no big-time wide receiver. Maybe you could get a guy, a bargain guy there, but I don't think you're going to get a big impact player in next year's free agency class at the wide receiver spot. Center position, there was one guy that kind of jumped out at me. He's a little up there in age. I think he's 30, 31, but he was the 4th-ranked center in all of football last year, and that is Rodney Hudson. That's a guy the Giants could certainly maybe spend a couple of dollars on as well if they feel fit to fill in at that center position if Jalapeno or whoever else is playing the position this year is not getting the job done. Edge rusher, which I think is most Giants fans thought to be biggest area of concern for this team. We have not been able to get after the quarterback. We brought in Marcus Golden this year. You hope Lorenzo Carter gets better. The X-Man, the 3rd-round pick out of Old Dominion. So there's some prospects there that hopefully mold into something. Marcus Golden will be a free agent next year. We'll start with him. Giants signed him on a bargain deal for $3.75 million. If Golden gets back to his old ways before his injury he sustained, and he's been not good the last 2 years because of it, if he gets back to his old ways, the way that he fits in a James Bettcher defense, say he comes in, gets 10, 11 sacks, Giants could elect to extend him. He, of course, would cost a lot more than $3.75 per. He'd still be relatively young, I believe, at 29, 30 years old next year, and would probably command a 3 or 4 year deal if he proved to be a bounce-back candidate this year. The big name everybody talks about is JADEVEON CLOWNEY. He was franchised this year by the Houston Texans, and he is set to hit the open market next year, and I very much doubt the Texans would franchise him again. JADEVEON CLOWNEY, of course, a generational pass rusher coming out of college, the #1 overall pick in the draft. A lot of talent, and I think a lot of people don't realize how good he is against the run. He's a complete football player there on the edge and would be a great fit for the New York Giants and their 3-4 defense. Dante Fowler Jr., another guy maybe you want to keep an eye on. He's still young, hasn't really proven to be a great pro yet. He only has about 16 or 17 career sacks, but he does have a lot of talent. And at maybe you get him on a pretty cheap deal for a guy that has a high ceiling that still hasn't hit his prime yet. Mario Addison, a veteran, he's pretty much gotten 10 sacks each of the last 3 seasons. And another guy that the Giants could definitely bring in to get that pass rush role. Von Miller's on a club option. Of course, if you ever hit the open market, you throw the kitchen sink at him. But I think if I had to guess, the Broncos are going to retain his services. We all remember how instrumental he was in winning that Super Bowl for that franchise, and he's arguably the best edge rusher in the sport of football. And the last guy I wanted to speak on was Ezekiel Ansah, the veteran edge rusher as well. I think he's going to be 31, 32 next year. Maybe a guy you could bring in there on a short-term deal for an edge rusher position. And then the safety spot, there's a lot of big names. Nobody that's great, but you have your Clinton Dix, your Carl Joseph, your Devin McCourty, who's going to be up there in age 34, and a DJ Swearinger. Of those guys, I think the guy that is most attractive to me when you factor in age and upside, I would say a DJ Swearinger, but nobody there really jumps off the page. But that's just a quick early look at next year's free agency class, the Giants' projected cap space going into next season, and what they would have to do to build that cap space up to try to bring in impact players. I definitely expect Janoris Jenkins to be gone. I think there's a very good chance Ogletree's gone. Rhett Ellison will be gone. Kareem Martin will be gone. I think the Giants will free up that money and try to bring in a few big-ticket free agents and add some depth to this roster. And next year's team could be pretty special. So, obviously, I'm looking forward to this year. I hope this team progresses. I hope they surprise some people. But it's always good to look into the future and plan ahead. But as always, if you liked what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.